Hello and welcome to my newest excursion into the world of James Bond on Laserdisc. And this particular episode will be about the pretty well known series of Japanese Evergreen releases, which all feature similar covers, such as this release of From Russia with Love. These are the original 1980s series of Japanese pan and scan and Academy ratio versions of the Bond series on Laserdisc, primarily through Warner Brothers Home Video, and really represent one of the first, if not the first, major catalog release of the Bond series on home video to do the entire series up to that point in time. So without further ado, I'm going to get into a comparison of most of the entire run I managed to pick up on LD. Not quite the entire run, I'm still missing a few, but I tried to do detailed comparisons to the US pan and scan discs that I have and those that I have on tape, as well as later pan and scan releases, and then of course the letterbox LD releases. So without further ado, off to the Laserland. So this is the first of the so-called Japanese Evergreen releases that I picked up. Now, it's by no means every film in the series, but it's the vast majority of them. And some, like From Russia with Love here, I have now in both versions. Now, the reason why these are called the Evergreen releases typically is because the later printings, all of these from Warner Home Video, of course, feature this Evergreen moniker. Of course, this is the reissue and this is the original. Now, if you look, this shares some similarities to early Warner Brothers jackets, particularly this extended play logo here, and then the cover image being boxed in with the sort of colored background with this sort of, I don't even know what type of pattern you'd call this, but then with some version of the original title font. It's very similar to, it's actually practically identical to their first VHS and beta releases of films from Warner Brothers. Of course, the Bond films are distributed on Warner home video releases, on worldwide releases throughout the 80s and 90s, and it kind of varies, but they did do a lot in foreign territories, so it's not always just any version of MGM-UA. Warner held a bit of Bond rights for a significant period of time. So all of these Japanese discs in this Evergreen series are all pretty much Warner Brothers releases. Now, this is the original 1982 printing, which uses the brown beige cover background and this lovely image of Connery on the front. I like all of the images they used for these jackets. I just wish it wasn't with this weird background with just like various shades of browns and purples and things. But they do have a certain charm to them, and thankfully all of these do have the original Obi strip with the 007 logo, and they're very stylized. So the Obi strips are also really, really cool. Then the rear cover carries on the design, and had Warner Brothers released the Bonds here in the US first on VHS and beta, it pretty much would have been this same cover artwork. And just, of course, as you notice, it's already sized for a sleeve dimension. Of course, the first US releases were done here by CBS Fox. But the reason why I always wanted to check these out is I always wondered if there were any mastering differences or some different sources used. And it's a little bit of a mix. Sometimes that seems to be the case, but of course I don't have every single version to compare each of these two. But for the most part, they do seem to be roughly the same master sources used for the first transfers done by CBS Fox simultaneously here in the US. But these are highly sought after, highly collectible releases because they're among the first true proper Bond releases anywhere, and the entire series up to this point was released in this matching jacket set, and each successive film was released to match the previously issued discs all the way up through License to Kill. So it is a desirable thing for both Bond fans and Laserdisc collectors to try and pick up all of them in the Evergreen series. What's also really cool about these that you wouldn't know necessarily until you pick them up is they each carry an exclusive insert, which is pretty common for Japanese discs, at least the ones that I've come across. So here you have an insert, of course, not very helpful if you can't read Japanese, but you do get nice images, and again, you get the gun barrel logo, and it's just single-sided, of course. The other side is blank. But what's also neat about these is all of them have custom labels. So they all are matching, which is really excellent. Forgive me as I slip this out. But here is the logo here, and they all maintain the classic 007 gun symbol logo with the film title, and then they each feature a shade of color with the black Warner Brothers label. So it's really cool that they all had matching labels, and that's, again, something that you're not necessarily going to notice unless you're actually looking at the physical copy, because online you wouldn't have any idea that these all have labels and inserts and everything. So here is the otherwise identical 1988 reprinting with the Evergreen moniker. They have just changed the background cover to this admittedly more appealing shade of just a shade of like maybe eggshell blue, I guess would be the easiest way to describe it. And the Obi's been updated a little bit with different pricing, and they've messed around with the layout. But yeah, it's the same exact disc. As with most Laserdiscs and any analog video format, if it's made a little bit later chronologically, it can be printed or manufactured better. But when I looked at these discs, they seemed practically identical. It was just the opening manufacturing bumpers were maybe a little bit different. Of course, because these are 80s discs, they are pretty much all 1:3:3 ratio, which means for the original films, the non-scope ones, which are Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, then later on Live and Let Die, and The Man with the Golden Gun, they're more of an open matte transfer. There's usually a little bit more on the head and bottom of the frame, but you lose a little bit on the sides. Whereas for all the scope films, which is the rest of the series, they are all pan and scan jobs. They are also analog only. They do not carry digital soundtracks. They do start doing that with the 80s films, which I'll talk about those in a minute. But for all of these, they are analog only 1:3:3 discs, pretty much like most early Laserdiscs up to the mid to late 80s were anyway. So if you've ever seen an early Laserdisc that is those same parameters, you'll know what you're kind of getting in for. And of course, because they're Japanese, they have hard-coded Japanese subtitles. Now, on the rear, they have updated it a bit. You have a bigger usage of of information, and then you have some nice stills that are, of course, printed much larger. So if you're a real completist, you would have to collect both jacket releases of each. But for the most part, they are pretty identical. This is just one of the ones where between the two jackets, the rear cover art is, definitely changed for the better, I would say. They did also change the insert a bit. It's a bit more modernized, and it looks nicer, and it's colored like the actual jacket. So it's a nice thing. And again, it's cool that each of these have an actual paper insert with some nice imagery and such. And then the actual disc itself uses pretty much the same label, but it still has the nice custom label art. I did do comparisons, and I have to say, it seems like in Japan they used the same exact masters they were using over here in the States. This is the final 1:3:3 release. It's reissued under the Connery Classics banner. So this was the final non-widescreen Laserdisc release from MGM. This was done, I believe, around 1990 or so, just before or right around the time of the Criterion CAV editions, which were the first major widescreen releases for the first three Bonds. And then MGM shortly followed up with the Connery Collection box sets, which was their first widescreen releases on their own label. So if you want to see this older version on Laserdiscs in higher quality, of course, than VHS or Beta, this is definitely the one to pick up. It's very cheap, it's very common and affordable, and the quality of not only the disc but the transfer is actually a lot better than the earlier releases. While it's cool to have the Japanese versions, they do have hard-coded subtitles, and you are looking at a mastering from 1982 versus one from about 89 or 90. And so I think this release, it's a little bit sharper. The Japanese releases are, a little bit softer for this particular title, but it is the exact same transfer print element and everything. I just think this pressing is a bit better. And of course, it costs far, far less. You can usually get a copy of this for about $1 or $2 these days. And then this art design would be kind of morphed into the same design used for the Letterbox series of Bond releases, so it matches those as well. So on this particular one, you can just pick up this particular edition and be fine if you want the 133 version on Laserdisc. But it is identical in terms of what's actually on the disc. I do think the of course the widescreen versions are much better, and the MGM widescreen version I think is a better element. It seems sharper even than the Criterion version. So that's my personal recommendation for the best overall version. But compared to the Japanese versions, I think this one is a bit better overall, and of course far cheaper. Now this next one, I only have the 1988 Evergreen printing. So this is the 1988 release of Goldfinger, which lovely art, and of course they very wisely kept the cover gold as the background. So this one I think works really well as a jacket image, and here you have the lovely obi strip also colored gold. Then the rear, and I'm sorry I don't pull off these obi strips. I did try to at first, but because they're already so old and they're still affixed to the covers, I don't want to risk breaking it. And it's very hard to get on and off. I managed to get some off, and then it's very, very finicky to try and get them back on without tearing them, especially since they're, nearly 40 years old now. But anyway, it does have the slightly revised cover design scheme on the rear here, and it looks like it's a really nice jacket. I think it's arguably the best of these Evergreen releases because it all completely works from a art perspective. Then, of course, you get the custom insert, which of course is colored gold. Again, not very helpful since you can't read Japanese unless you are able to. But it's nice that, again, that they did this. And then we have the label. Again, I really like all of these labels. I wish the US ones all had custom labels, but they didn't really do any sort of special labels except for the final THX box sets and THX releases in the late 90s. Now, this one is a bit of an unfortunate copy. A lot of the early CBS Fox releases here in the States, particularly the Pan and Scan Laserdiscs, suffer from time compression, and they use so much that it's noticeably sped up in order to fit the film onto a single disc. This is quite common with early Laserdiscs and really just early video in particular. Eventually, they got over that and were able to thankfully abandon that awful practice. But it rears its ugly head on the U.S. Pan and Scan disc, and also on this particular release, unfortunately. Otherwise, it's the same master source that MGM used on all of their Pan and Scan stuff. It's the same as the CBS stuff, CBS Fox tapes and such, which I have the original CBS Fox tape of this. It has the same strange jump edit at the end of the pre-title sequence. So all of the old versions of Goldfinger use the same source. And right after Shocking, Positively Shocking, there's a jump cut, and the first couple bars of the title song are missing. So that's something that will help you identify all the old masters of Goldfinger. This is the final Connery Classics rendition of the 133 version using that same transfer source, but thankfully this has no time compression. This is, already well under 2 hours, hour and 51 minutes roughly, so they shouldn't have had to use time compression, but I guess they felt the need to back in the day. And I think this transfer, it's a bit sharper, the color's a bit better. So I think this is the best of the original 133 editions of Goldfinger. And again, very cheap to pick up these days. It should only cost you about $1 or $2, depending on where you buy Laserdiscs from. And of course, it doesn't have the hard-coded Japanese subtitles or the time compression issues. Still analog-only audio, but if you want to see this particular master, you should definitely just go for this release with the Connery Classics banner. But still, it's nice to be able to compare to the Japanese version. It's just unfortunate that this is one of the only ones that has time compression issues that I've been able to check out and examine. Next up is the original release of Thunderball from 1982 with a really nice silver obi strip here. And here you have on the cover, it's printed much larger than the other early ones. But here is the main section of Connery from the Robert McGuinness original 1965 poster artwork. Of course, I wish they had just used the whole jacket. It still looks really impressive because you have the title in red, which is really bold and matches some of the original poster art. And then you have actual original poster art here, and it's actually much larger. But again, we have this very weird, generic, very horribly dated pattern with the brown beige color. Again, don't know why. They could have just had it all black, and that would have been fine. But I'm not complaining too much. It's still a nice jacket. But what's really great about these is the gatefolds are stunning. So I don't know how this is going to come across. I'm going to try and do it for a few different angles. But here you have an original printing of original Thunderball promotional materials of the main title piece here. And then here is a reprinting of an original Japanese Thunderball poster. Again, I'm trying to do this as best I can to get across the gatefold. It's kind of hard when they print sideways like this, but to also show you this way to get a better view. And again, I did try taking off all the obi strips, but I don't want to risk breaking them because, of course, they are so old now. So again, I do apologize that the obi strip kind of blocks a lot of the gatefold action there, but you do get the idea, and these are really, really well printed. So they are extraordinarily impressive gatefolds, particularly since the U.S. releases really didn't have anything like that. The rears, just like from Russia with Love on the 82 pressings, very generic, pretty much sized up for VHS and Beta, and had there been a U.S. Warner Brothers release back in 82, it would have looked like this. Transfer-wise, this is pretty much identical to the original CBS Fox release shown here. So this is also pan and scan, analog only, from 1983 or so, from the same original run. Also uses the Robert McGinnis artwork, but here you get all of it. Apologies, this jacket is a bit dinged up because, of course, it's not a gatefold, so these discs sliding around all this time will cause all kinds of wear. But it's the same transfer, same print source, got the same damage marks. It's got the same analog mono track that sounds pretty good, but it's got a little noise and some defects in there. So you can pick up this copy for, a few bucks here and not have to go to the expense of getting the Japanese version. I will say that it did seem like the Japanese disc is a little bit brighter, but Japanese discs usually have a little bit different mastering in the IRE levels. So either they'll be a little brighter, usually they're a little darker than the US releases, and you have to adjust for that. But it did seem like this pressing was a bit brighter than the US one. So they're pretty much identical, and if you pick this version up, it's of course a lot cheaper, and you don't have to deal with the hard-coded Japanese subtitles. But there is something fun about looking at these original 1982 releases now that they're so old, and of course with hard-coded subtitles and such. But it's actually a surprisingly good rendition of Thunderball for being, one of the original pan and scan jobs. Next, we have the Evergreen release of Honor Majesty's Secret Service. They were jumping ahead a bit because, again, I didn't get all of them, but I got the vast majority, and we're just working through chronologically. Again, this being one of the 88 discs, you have the bigger art, which some of the stills they chose, they're much more of a tranquil or just everyday nature. Like, of course, from Russia with Love, Bond with a phone. Here you have Bond and Tracy, and while it's a nice jacket, and it still looks really nice. Of course, it doesn't really show off that this is a Bond film. You do have the nice redesigned obi strip, and again, at least they've gone for a purplish background. But again, I wish they had done a different design to make them more exciting looking, but they do have a style of their own, and once you look at these in your hand, it is a bit more appealing than just seeing an image online. There is a phenomenal gatefold. This one just comprised of tinted stills, like a lot of MGM UA jackets were doing around this time. They pretty much got to where they're doing that with everything, and I think I can slide this over a little bit if it wants to let me. Yeah, there we go. And here in the center, you have a shot from the wedding scene. And here, more stills. And it does match the rest of the color, being tinted kind of purpley. But, of course, I wish they would just have gone full color if they were going to use any color at all. And then show the rear. Again, nice bigger art and bigger text, so it's a lot more appealing to the eye and easier to read than the 82 releases. So it's a nice jacket. It's got a great gatefold, but again, when you do comparisons, the US release uses a big chunk of the original artwork, although very funnily they cut Bond and Tracy out entirely. So you have the bottom center portion with Blofeld and all of the Spectre skiers, but it's still a nice jacket and it is original artwork. So they did get that part right, even though they just kind of took a random chunk of it. It does seem to be the same print source, but what's interesting is the US disc is quite a bit brighter. The Japanese disc is darker. So again, it's probably an IRE brightness difference. But the real surprise is OHMSS has had different issues with cuts and runtime, and it wasn't really until the Letterbox Laserdisc release that you had a proper Letterbox, fully complete and uncut version on home video. And then, of course, there were some later versions that did have cuts and problems, so it's had some issues over the years. But what I found really interesting, it does seem to be the same source they used, but for some oddball reason, the this Japanese disc, the one difference I did note right off the bat is during the gun barrel, there's a jump. There's a section that's missing. So it jumps from the end of the gun barrel and it cuts the opening shot of the Universal Export sign with Peter Hunt's reflection in it. And it cuts right into Q talking about the radioactive lint in M's office, which was kind of bizarre because you just don't expect stuff like that. But, it was much more prone to happen back in the day because they didn't have as many sources to use. There was no digital technology to use in cleaning up prints, and they weren't really mixing in other sources at the time and creating composite prints for home video usage. But again, it seems to be the same source as the US release, but the US release doesn't have that problem. So that was just something odd I noticed. But again, there could be a few more little oddities in some of these, but I did do a real good search of everything, and that seems to be the only one I noticed on here. But it was just kind of bizarre that happened when they seem to be identical otherwise. Of course, the US release here, it's also pan and scan, analog mono, same as the Japanese, but of course, it's going to cost you far less, and you don't have the hard-coded subtitles. Here is the insert of the Japanese, and the label, which is pretty much the same as the others, but just so you can get a glimpse of that. So moving on to Diamonds Are Forever. Here we have the Evergreen 1988 pressing. Again, larger artwork, and here they went for this sort of purple, and it works quite well, actually. Again, some of these kind of look garish at first, but once you look at them for a while, they have a style of their own. And I do like these later jackets because they have bigger artwork and they seem a lot more pleasing to the eye. And again, the printing on these is really good, and particularly for how old they are. But this one has a gatefold that I just think is fantastic. It's just a candid. It's Connery in the elevator from the White House penthouse with the lovely Ken Adam designed metallic panels. This, of course, right before the sleeping gas is going to come out of the ceiling. But it's just a really nice idea for a gatefold. They don't do anything else. It's very plain, but let me show you this way as well. But this was a real surprise. I expected something like the Thunderball one or the OHMSS one, but this one they just put a whole shot of Connery up, and it's on a nice kind of glossy stock, and it's just really, really cool, even though it's totally random what they chose. And here on the rear, you have, again, nice art, much bigger than what it would have been on the original jacket. And of course, I can't read Japanese, but it's a nice jacket, actually. And again, at first, the covers kind of look garish with these random colors, but after a while, they really kind of grow on you. Transfer-wise, this does look pretty good. Again, it's 133, so it's pan and scan, but it looks really darn good for its age, especially compared to what you would be looking on the VHS tapes we could have afforded back in the day, because LD was out of most people's price range. I don't have the US pan and scan for diamonds, but you know, I'm sure it looks pretty much similar to this, just without subtitles. What I did find interesting about this particular disc, for the most part, these have the United Artists turning UA logo. And so that kind of dates them for the, because they were all minted in the early 80s for the most part. This one has a number of logos. It has the MGM Silver Jubilee logo, followed by a handwritten United Artists Presents card, which is kind of bizarre. I haven't seen that one pretty much at all, if very often. And then it has the standard turning UA logo like the others do. I always like to track and see if they keep original logos on releases, but pretty much for home video, they usually would use just the same one over and over, or what would have been common or what was in use at the time that that particular disc or master was made. So it seems like for the most part, these use the turning UA letter logo. Here is the Diamonds Are Forever custom insert. And here is the custom disc label as well. So here we have the Evergreen release of Live and Let Die, which uses the iconic, amazing original poster artwork, and it's nice and big on here, although again, I could have done without the sort of generic pattern, but it matches the others, and we have the lovely original Obi strip. This one's in a really good condition jacket, which isn't always the case on some of these. The other thing is they use a thicker cardstock on a lot of Japanese releases, but these particular older ones, they're okay for the most part, but some of the original ones, For Much With Love seems to be the worst offender. They have sort of a musty smell to them, like you get on some vintage LPs and records, particularly 60s and 70s era that used super thick cardboard. Sometimes certain jackets like that can get a certain musty odor to them. So some of those are affected by that. So that's why I'm kind of keeping some of them separate to try and get some of that out of there. But that is something to note. But these later ones, particularly these Evergreen ones, don't have that problem at all. And they've held up remarkably well because, you know, these are well over 30 years old. Really nice rear cover. Again, nice imagery and everything. So it's a really wonderful jacket, even though it's still in this design. Now, what should be noted about this, like the US release, this is time compressed to fit on one disc, so it does have some pretty hysterical sped up voices, almost like everyone's sucking helium. Of course, if you watch a lot of PAL DVDs, you may be used to something like that, but these early time compression jobs are usually far worse than even PAL discs, so I would not recommend to watch the film on the early Laserdisc because of that. But that aside, the transfer is actually pretty darn nice. It seems very similar to the US one. But what's really cool about this one, when it cuts to the opening titles, they're actually letterboxed. This was kind of common for the early days of Pan and Scan. They would still letterbox title sequences because they didn't want to cut off any names. But then, you know, most of the time they would just say to heck with it and lop off names anyway. And so people would not get properly credited, which caused some legal issues on and off. But it's cool that this one does that. It's the only real difference between this and the US copy from CBS Fox. Again, uses original artwork. It's the same master, same source, also time compressed. But when you get to the opening titles here, they are 133, so they are not letterboxed like the Japanese pressing is. I would say comparing these two, even though they're the same transfer, I think the US copy, it's got less noise. It seems like the color's a bit more saturated. So I would say image-wise, if you were, you know, comparing them side by side, I think the US copy wins out. But I will say the opening title sequence with all of the torches and red flames kind of wreaks havoc with old school analog. So I actually think the Japanese version kind of tracks that better. But overall, I think the transfer is better on the US release, just slightly, because they are pretty much the same. And I do think it's nice that they kept the color of each of the jackets on the inserts and the disc labels. So here is the label with the title in green. I just can't get over how awesome and how much I love these custom labels. It's so simple, but it's something that's really kind of gotten lost. Here we go with the Evergreen release for The Man with the Golden Gun. Again, actually a really nice jacket, and they wisely stuck with a yellow goldish color for the background, again using a significant portion of the original artwork, and the lovely matching obi strip is here as well. So it's a nice jacket. It really does work, and again, because it's printed later, it's got nice glossy cardstock, and it's held up really well as a jacket despite the dated background. Here you have some nice stills, well printed as well. And then the actual insert and disc. Here is the custom insert and the matching custom disc label. Now, like Live and Let Die, this is 1:3:3, which isn't so bad because this is a 1:8:5 spherical ratio film. But unfortunately, like Live and Let Die, this film is also time compressed, just like the US release. So again, I would not recommend watching this or Live and Let Die on the original releases due to the heavy time compression. It is the same master-wise as this US original pressing, shown here, which again has the benefit of using more of the original artwork and fitting into the very understated but standardized CBS Fox design. So I do prefer these jackets because of that, but the Japanese versions do have their own charms, and it's roughly identical because it's the same idea. I do think this disc, in terms of transfer on the US one, it's a bit better balanced. I think the Japanese version has a bit more color saturation, but again, it's almost identical. This is just from me toggling back and forth between the two because I was already comparing them, so I decided to make some visual notes as well. The soundtrack seems exactly the same, and they both suffer from the really bad time compression, which on some of these releases, particularly some of the worst offenders are like the Pan and Scan Spy Who Loved Me, for example, where it's like the whole film is playing 10% too fast. It's quite hysterical at points, but it's definitely not advisable to watch films from this era with heavy time compression to fit them onto less discs and stuff. But it's nice to see where things started. And I think the transfers are actually remarkably good on these. However, if you want to see this film in the best early Laserdisc release and still see it in the 1:3:3 aspect version, I must tell you to seek out this release that was released under the More Classics banner. It's matching to the Connery Classics banner, but they only did a couple of these like they did for the Connery films. This was the last release of Laserdisc before they started finally releasing the films in letterboxed issues. So this is still 1:3:3. It's the same master source as the previous releases. The quality of this release is so far beyond the earlier discs that it really shows how much analog video formats could come in just a few years. It's the same source material, but the black levels, the color, everything is spot on. The audio is much better. It's presented in the PCM digital format. So fidelity is increased across the board, and I think it's great to have along with the letterbox issue that's even better in order to have the alternate 1:3:3 framing for this film, which it's not intended to be seen that way, but sometimes it's cool to see a little bit of extra headroom and see some additional things every once in a while, and also to have on hand as an alternate. The older discs are nice to see for their time and such, but this also doesn't have that awful time compression issue. So I personally really like this release, and it's actually extraordinarily accurate how the film should look, and especially in terms of color and black levels. But that being said, I am happy that I do have the older releases. It's always nice to see what things started out like on home video, and for the time period, these are really nice discs. I just wish they didn't have the time compression issue. That's the one real drawback. Next, we jump ahead a bit to For Your Eyes Only. This done in the original series, released in 1982, just thereafter. This released in 1982, right after the original theatrical run had ended. So it has the older silver obi strip and then the original jacket design. But you have the centerpiece of the UK international artwork that has the Legs campaign, but also the wonderful art from the UK poster that's not on the US release. This is a surprisingly good disc for 1982. It's a really great transfer that's just unfortunately pan and scanned, but outside of that, the color is nice, the detail's nice. I was very pleasantly shocked at how nice this looked for a 1982 Japanese Laserdisc. Because the further back you go in any video format, the worse transfers are usually going to look, particularly old pan and scan jobs. What's interesting about the gatefold, here they just went with a central image. Again, apologies for the obi strip kind of blocking. See if I can slide it down some. There we go. Some of these I can slide pretty easily, but then most of them seem pretty much rooted in place. So here they've gone for a shot of Bond and Melina, and I mean it's quite nice. It's a romantic still, but you would expect more of a big sprawling action scene for the gatefold or something. But again, it's nice they were doing something. Again, a lot of the U.S. releases really didn't have gatefolds for the early ones, and then when they did, they were just kind of some hodgepodges of tinted stills and such. But it's nice when they use the whole width like this, like they do on some of these Japanese releases. So I do quite like that, even though it's a bit different. And to show the rear, again, like the other discs I have of the 1982 series, pretty generic and sized already for tape and beta releases. It is analog only, but it is the film's stereo mix, and it is surround encoded, so it will decode out Pro Logic and give you the original Dolby Surround mix of the film. So that's not super common for early discs either. So it didn't have a mono fold down remix or something. This has the original Dolby Stereo mix, and it sounds actually really nice over analog. Nowhere near as good, say, for example, as the letterbox release with digital Dolby Surround. But still really good for the time period. Again, this is a great disc from 1982 all around. If it had digital sound, it would be even better. But yeah, it's a definite surprise. But of course, not so much considering this was a brand new film at the time. And of course, they were making a brand new master of a brand new film and got it out on video the very next year. So yeah, this is a nice release. As we go on, they get better and better and better. So by this point in the Japanese run, if you can live with pan and scan discs and you want to see like the earliest transfers around in nice quality, this will be right up your alley. Then to show the disc and insert, here we have the insert, and of course it's from the 1982 series, so it's much more generic and has that brown beige cast to it. And then the custom label also is brown beige, but also looks pretty cool. I'm just a sucker for custom labels, I guess. And here we have another big step forward in quality overall. Here is the Japanese release of A View to a Kill, still with the silver obi design and still with the generic beige extended play jacket, but they're already using more of the original artwork here. Here is one of the posters with the lovely rendering of Bond and Mayday that formed a number of the original campaign posters. And again, it's printed larger like the 1988 jackets would be. So already they're starting to transition over in terms of artwork and layout. Then the gatefold, again going with full image shots with a sort of orange beige-ish background color, so it matches the For Your Eyes Only gatefold, but of course it doesn't have a complete wrap, a single image. They go for just two images of both Bond and Mayday, and well printed and in full color, so I do give them that. I don't know what was going on with the color choice here. Looks more like a like a makeup kit or something, but anyway, at least they were doing something with the gatefold, which doesn't always happen on LDs. And here on the rear, you have the same rear design as the 82 discs, already sized for tape and beta. But again, it's even better overall than the For Your Eyes Only disc. This was made in 1985, right after the film came out. Sharpness, detail, clarity are excellent. It does seem actually rather close to the letterbox pressing that eventually came out. And what's also great about this does add a digital soundtrack, which sounds like it's pretty much the same track that's on the letterbox released. and it is the film's original Dolby Stereo mix. And for my money, it's the best sounding release of the film, either on this version or the letterbox copy, because they seem to be the same track. It's got a lot of natural low end to it that's not really on the 5.1 remixes. And I'm such a purist and a stickler for original audio mixes that I like to hear original Dolby Stereo tracks if at all possible, even though a 5.1 remix is supposed to be the same thing and shouldn't change anything. From my experience, it's very common for things to get tweaked or equalized differently, even by accident. So, with View to a Kill in particular, it's one of those that I think sounds much better on Laserdisc in its original mix, and it's really cool to see that that has made it to the Japanese Evergreen series. When I got this, I didn't even realize this had digital sound. Let me show you the disc and insert. So it has the standard beige style insert like the other 82 discs. And then here is the custom label. So anyway, again, this is another big step forward in quality. I think it looks and sounds excellent for its time period. The only problem with this release is the fact that it is still pan and scanned, so you will need to get the US letterbox copy to get the best version on Laserdisc. But outside of that, and of course the hard-coded Japanese subtitles, this is an excellent release. Same thing here. This disc is even better than the last. Here we have the Japanese release of The Living Daylights. Again, using the phenomenal UK artwork, lovingly printed, although I love this poster so much, I wish that somebody had just printed it on an entire LD jacket cover to have it in a nice frameable position. But because they went with a red background and a matching obi strip, it, I think, is probably the best looking of all of the Evergreen series. And again, I adore this poster artwork so much. The US campaign was good, but this is just a definitive series poster. Again, quality-wise, this is a fantastic pressing. I think it's the source of the US letterbox copy because it looks pretty darn identical, except it's just pan and scanned instead of in scope, like the US letterbox copy from a couple years down the road after this was. So detail, color, everything is excellent. It's just unfortunately pan and scanned. It does have the original Dolby Stereo mix in digital. Sounds excellent, just like the widescreen release. Again, like A View to a Kill, it seems the only issue with this, outside of course hard-coded subtitles, is the fact that it's pan and scan and not widescreen. Now to show you the inner, here they went with a photo collage, which looks really, really nice. Of course, like anything from this era in printing, it's going to look a little bit dated, but it does have a charm to it. And of course, it does befit the era the film was made in, because by this point they had, drastically shortened the day and date window between a film ending its original run and coming out on disc. And then here's the rear. Again, better use of the LD jacket dimensions. Looks really nice, and it's got some great stills as well. Again, excellent transfer. Has the original mix, sounds great, and it's has lossless digital quality, so there's no compression going on. It's just unfortunately pan and scan. That's the only issue. Now, what's interesting is you would think the US copy, which I have here, would be the same. And this is one of the few times it is not the case. This is really the oddball in all of the original US Bond releases. So I think the Japanese one is the master they eventually used for the letterbox release. But for some strange unknown reason, and I didn't know this until I started looking at this particular disc once I got a copy, for some strange reason, they seem to have done a print transfer instead of using an interpositive or something like they did for the others, it seems. This is a print transfer of an original release print. It has different color timing. It looks exactly like what you would see if you get the chance to see an original 1987 release print of The Living Daylights at, like, say, for example, an art house screening. It has really deep black levels. It has a different color timing to the other releases. So in a lot of ways, this is a perfectly accurate copy of an original release print, except that it's pan and scanned. which is kind of bizarre. But then the title sequence is actually letterbox, so you can see the title sequence letterbox. But the rest of the film is, of course, pan and scanned. But the detail is excellent. The color is spot on. I have seen an original Living Daylights release print, so I can vouch for how it should technically look. The other releases, the letterbox on the Japanese, the colors are a little bit more saturated, but imagine this is basically like a time-stamped version of what an original print would look like. So if you're curious, you can get this particular version for very cheap. I think it's great to have both because this is like, again, it's like a time capsule of what it looked like if you had made like a direct video dub of a print. It would look like this. It does have the original Dolby Stereo mix as well, but it's unfortunately analog only, so it doesn't have the wonderful digital PCM rendering. But still, I think the transfer is so interesting, and it's exclusive to this disc that I think it's important to have this disc as well. And here you have the original US one-sheet art, which is also iconic, but I just don't think it lives up to the amazing quality of the original British art. But anyway, this is the one US disc that's an oddball, and no other disc in the original pan and scan run is quite like this. And I don't know why this happened, but I just kind of lucked onto it by accident by just getting a copy of this, going, I don't need it in pan and scan. Well, I'll just check it on for a minute and going, wait a minute, this looks totally different. What's going on here? So this is a real surprise, and I do recommend Bond fans pick this up if you're interested in transfer differences. And before I forget, I will show you the Japanese insert for TLD here with a red background and then the matching red custom label. Now this one's a bit of an oddball, but it is part of the Evergreen series. It's not essential to have because it's been ported over on later releases as extra material, but it's still really cool. So this is the 1987 or so television special Happy Anniversary 007, which was done to coincide with the release of The Living Daylights and it being the silver 25th anniversary of the series. But what's great about this, as I'm sure you guys probably very well know, is that it was hosted by Roger Moore, who basically narrates and talks about Bond and basically sets up various film clips and little bits of talking head interviews and things. But it's really cool to see something from this era back in the 80s, of course, with people who are no longer with us. And of course, it's a product of its time. And, it has a certain charm to it, and especially if you saw it when it was originally aired. So, of course, it's focused around promoting The Living Daylights for the most part. It's cool seeing it on this release because here you have every single Evergreen release up to this point laid out, so you can almost use it as a checklist for the ones you haven't gotten yet. And then, of course, the background is the Living Daylights poster. And you have this nice custom obi strip here. And then here on the back is an actual breakdown of not only chapters, but actually, I'm pretty sure this refers to individual film clips. So this Laserdisc was designed to give you direct scene access and then identify from which film this particular clip is from, which I think is a really, really cool touch. Because this was back in the day, of course, long before the internet was around. And so to have something like this in a, hour-long special, I think is a really, really great thing for, fans or people who are new to the series to be able to identify certain films that they saw something from and they wanted to go see the film that particular scene is in. And of course, I know when I was growing up, it was very confusing to at least get the chronological order right in your head, let alone know what was in each film and which film came first before another film, say, for example. So again, this is my particular guess because it says chapter and then scene and then title. So because it's in Japanese, I'm just guessing, but I'm pretty sure this refers to which clip is from which film, which again is a really cool thing for them to have done back in the day. And of course, it does come with its own custom insert. And here you have a shot of each Bond at the time and complete with the matching custom disc labels. So again, it's not essential to have this, but if you're going to collect all of the Evergreen discs, this technically is one of them. And it's cool that they did this, even though this is just a 50 or some odd minute television special. You can see this special, of course, on the Ultimate Edition DVDs or Blu-rays as an extra, but there's something about seeing it this way in analog video because it was shot on video for the most part, and of course, hard-coded Japanese subtitles make everything cooler. Now, last but certainly not least, comes the final Pan and Scan era Japanese Laserdisc. This one is not an Evergreen disc because it was, of course, brand new at the time, and this was when they pretty much stopped the Evergreen series, but it technically counts as the final one. This is, of course, the Japanese Pan and Scan release of License to Kill, also from Warner Home Video at the time. And here it has the Obi strip under the Blockbuster series. But again, this technically counts as the final in the Evergreen series. Now, when I first got into various Bond editions, I always wanted to track this disc down because it was rumored to be the original uncut, unrated version with all of the violent scenes intact that were removed from the US release and also the UK release and others. This film was never released uncut until the 2006 Ultimate Edition DVDs, which is what most outlets or fans would tell you. However, there are a few little ones. I think there's a German PAL version that's supposed to be uncut as well. But this release is indeed fully uncut, and it's NTSC, so it doesn't have PAL speed up or anything. So I always wanted to track this down. This was the one Japanese disc I wanted to get. Wanted to get it for years just to check it out. And then, of course, the Ultimate Editions came out, and we could finally see the film uncut. And it wasn't a rare thing anymore to see all the violent pieces. But I still wanted to see this and to see if it was indeed fully uncut. And when I got this lot of discs, this was in there. And this was one of the big draws because I was finally going to get to see this particular copy. So... So, this is indeed fully 100% uncut. So, if you wanted to see the full unrated film back in the day in the best possible quality, this was the way to do it until 2006. It does carry the original Dolby Stereo mix in PCM, sounds the same as the Letterboxd later copies, and the mastering seems to be the same as the Letterboxd later copies as well. So, really, the only problem here is that it's pan and scanned. Outside of that, this is a flawless release and is fully uncut. So all of the violence is there. The shark attack, the decompression chamber, the shots to the chest that the woman takes when Sanchez's private army shells the little house where they're torturing Bond tied up is in there. The full shots of Heller's... Heller, what happens to that particular character are in there. And of course, most importantly, the entirety of the climax is in there because most infamously in the release version, there's a significant jump edit where Bond is running away from an explosion, and it's just a horrible jump that will drive you crazy until you see the full version, and it makes no sense why they really cut it that way, but that's what they had to do to appease the U.S. censor back in the day, and it's a really bad edit that thankfully is now restored, but if you wanted to see it back in the day, you had to track down this elusive version. So the cover uses the main U.S. art, which it looks pretty good on this, but this particular design, this is when they transitioned over to using photo collages and trying to be more modern, and it hasn't really dated very well. License to Kill is known for not having a great ad campaign, but it does look great on the LD jackets because, of course, nowadays they don't even use the original artwork on video releases anymore. The inside is much like what you get on the Fox Letterboxd copy. Plain background, extensive liner notes, and then some nice photo stills. But here they're, in a mix of black and white and color tinted. But it does look like a pretty nice gatefold. And again, anytime you got nice gatefold action in the Laserdisc era, you had to just kind of take what you could get because some studios just didn't do a whole lot. So any nice gatefold materials, I'm just happy they're there. And then the rear cover is pretty nice, going with a plain black background. And this is pretty similar to the second Letterboxd reissue MGM did here in the States. So again, It's really great that this is the full, uncut, unrated version. The only problem with this disc is that it's pan and scanned. That's the only problem. The audio is perfect. It's the film's original mix. I think it sounds best on Laserdisc. I don't think the 5.1 remixes sound quite as good on the later releases. So if I watch the film, I usually watch the US second letterbox pressing because it's better than the first pressing. But then, of course, you have the issues with the cuts. So then I have to kind of jump back and forth between watching it on Laserdisc and watching the Blu-ray, which is, of course, fully uncut. But now that I have this version on Laserdisc, I just wish it wasn't pan and scanned because otherwise it's perfect. It has the great original sound mix and it's fully uncut. It's just pan and scanned with hard-coded Japanese subtitles. Quality-wise, it's excellent. Detail, color, everything. So yeah, I would recommend if you're going to pick up any Japanese Laserdisc of Bond, go for this one because of the exclusivity and the great audio and the fact that it is fully uncut. Here in the US, we did get the letterbox release. This is the standard Fox version, but of course it is the US PG-13 censored version. However, it does seem to be the same master source as the Japanese version, so I guess they must have had to just redo the trims when they made the Video Master. It is a nice transfer for the era, but because it's an early letterbox disc, it is a bit soft, it is a bit noisy. This particular disc is a little bit prone to laser rot. I have a little bit of speckling that happens on side 3. But otherwise, it is a nice, solid, early letterbox release. But it is, of course, the PG-13 US edit. It does have the same original mix. It is PCM encoded. This does include some of the trailers, which I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember exactly if this does. I think it may have the License to Kill trailer, but this one also includes the Living Daylights teaser trailer. And then the gatefold is sort of similar, some of the same stills, but in full color and a much better usage of jacket. And you get the nice Fox liner notes from the time period. However, if you were to get the best version on Laserdisc overall, I'd have to point you to the 1994 MGM reissue. This uses the same master again, but the pressing is much better. There's no laser rot issues. It's much sharper. The color's better. It's a better transfer overall. And this was the last of the letterbox releases they did. And unfortunately, they didn't redo all of them in this lovely full cover art jacket rendering. This is still, unfortunately, the PG-13 version that was shown in the US on the original release, so it is still cut, but it is the best quality presentation on Laserdisc. It does have the original mix. It's in digital as well. So I would recommend this would be the one to own overall if you wanted to watch the film on Laserdisc in the correct ratio and have the best pressing. This does have a really nice gatefold with great stills, and the sides are broken up a bit better on here, and it does include the original trailer. But it is really cool to finally know for sure that this original Japanese pressing is indeed fully uncut, and that's something I've wanted to know for sure about for many, many, many years. So it's great to finally have that particular mystery solved. So thanks for listening to me babble on about these Japanese discs. They're a real interesting, aspect of the Bond series on video in terms of the video history of everything, and it's really a interesting change to go all the way back to these original 1982 to 1988 or so releases. For the most part, they do seem to be the same as what we eventually got here in the States. Our releases really started hot and heavy in 1983 or so, pretty much kind of piggybacking off of these Japanese discs. But there are some interesting differences, and there are a lot of collectors who try to get this entire series. They're very difficult to obtain. But there's something to be said about the historical value of these and just the real interesting part about seeing, these first major releases, and of course with their Japanese hard-coded subtitles and awesome packaging and inserts and everything. So this is something I've always wanted to do. I just never thought to get the opportunity to, but I had this giant lot of Japanese titles presented to me, and I couldn't say no because something like this would never come around again. So I'm working on doing the comparisons of the widescreen discs, which I picked up, which I have the whole run in letterbox. So that's taking a bit longer. Just like with this one, I wanted to make sure and do as many comparisons as I could to the other main versions and all the US versions in particular. So definitely be looking out for that coming up next. But this was just something I really wanted to get out there because there's not a lot of information out there about the Evergreen discs or any of the Japanese releases outside of little tidbits here and there. And a lot of people still like to swear by Japanese pressings being better, but for the most part, they're usually very similar, sometimes using the same masters most of the time. A little bit of difference in pressing quality and brightness levels, but for the most part, they're roughly the same. But these have never really been documented in terms of their transfers or anything. But I really wanted to put due diligence in on all of these. So this is the first of a two-parter. So be on the lookout for me to post about the letterbox discs, hopefully soon in the near future. So as always, thanks for watching, everybody, and hopefully you've gotten something out of me babbling on about Japanese Laserdiscs from the 1980s. So thanks again for watching, everybody.